Yeah, hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Let's get straight into the chanting before our meditations and continuing the commentary on the 8 verses of thought transformation. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Tatayampi Buddham saranam gacchami. Tatayampi Dhammam saranam gacchami. Tatayampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing the 6 paramitas, may I soon attain enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing the 6 paramitas, may I soon attain enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing the 6 paramitas, may I soon attain enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May they be free from suffering and its causes. May they never be parted from the happiness beyond suffering. May they abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment to the near, and aversion from the far. I shall cause this. Great compassionate Buddha, please inspire me to be able to do so. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every types of offerings, actual and mentally transformed. I confess all of my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in all the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. These remain until cyclic existence ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for all sentient beings. I dedicate the virtues of myself and others to the great enlightenment. However innumerable all sentient beings are, about to save them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, about to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, about to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, about to follow it completely. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Tayata gati gati para samgati bodhi soham. Tayata gati para samgati bodhi soham. Tayata gati para samgati bodhi soha. So now get yourself ready for some meditation. Initially to release the tension in the body. So bring your mind inside your body and release the tension from the bottom to the top. Let's take a few moments to do this now. And when you've completed it, just scan your body once more to see if there's any leftover tension that you can release. And now bring your mind initially to the tip of your nose. And the object of the meditation, as per usual, is following the feeling of the breath as you breathe into your lungs and then back out your nose again. Focus on this feeling of the breath as it goes in your nose, passes your throat, passes the chest area, and then into the lungs as they expand when they fill with the air. They compress as the air leaves them. And then back out, passes your throat again, and then back out your nose. If any thoughts arise, or any other mental activity arises, don't cling to it. Don't grasp at it. Also, don't try to force it away or deny it, but simply and naturally let it go by replacing your mind back onto the breath. You might also like to add the extra technique of counting the breaths from 1 to 10. 1 in-breath and 1 out-breath is 1, and so on. Don't count past 10 though. And if you get distracted while counting on the way to 10, go back to 1 at that time. So let's practice in silence for a little bit. So now we can feel pleased with ourselves for engaging in the breath meditation. And let's fill ourselves with universal loving kindness. Fill our whole being with the feeling of this universal loving kindness. And utilize the visualization of filling our whole being with the white light, or nectar if you prefer. Fill yourself with respect, appreciation, acceptance, friendship, the love, the kindness, forgiveness, honesty. Fill yourself with so much love and kindness now that it radiates outwards, that overflows and radiates out initially to your loved ones, family and friends, and fills them with the universal love and kindness too. Wish that they're happy, free from suffering, and are peaceful. And now also include strangers. And even those people you may regard as enemies. May all of these people be happy, free from suffering, and to be peaceful. Now let's bring to mind all living beings, all different types of living beings, whether we know about them or not, whether they're big or small, short or tall, seen or unseen, near or distant, born or to be born, whether they live in the waters, on the land, in the air, born from eggs, wombs, moisture, or through transformation. Bring to mind all of these living beings and extend love and kindness to them, initially around your immediate area, further and further now, radiating this love and kindness out throughout your whole state or county. And other states and counties throughout your whole country. Now, other countries throughout the world, initially those you're familiar with, have an affinity towards. Also those you're indifferent towards. And also those that you may have some negative feelings about. Until your loving kindness also pervades throughout all of the oceans and waterways on this planet. Till your loving kindness pervades throughout the whole planet, all the way to the core of the earth and to the outermost atmosphere. Now the extension or the radiation of our love and kindness is gathering so much momentum now that it radiates beyond this planet alone, throughout the whole solar system. And all of the solar systems throughout this galaxy. All of the galaxies throughout the universe. Until your loving kindness pervades throughout infinite space. You are not disconnected from infinite space and all of the living beings, all of the innumerable living beings. We are all interconnected, interrelated, interdependent. We all also have the same true nature, the Buddha nature, potential to attain what we call enlightenment. And now let's switch techniques to in Tibetan, Tong meditation, translated to English as giving, taking. We're going to take all of the suffering, relieve others of all the suffering, and take it upon ourselves to destroy and melt away our ego, self-centeredness, at the same time freeing them from the suffering And then we give all of our goodness, our good karma, merits, whatever wisdom we have, a compassion that we have already, as well as all those things that we feel pleased about, things we have attachment to. So as we do this, we're giving up our attachment, at the same time giving happiness to all living beings. So do the best you can to just know or visualize if you can, but just know that there's innumerable living beings in front of you right now. And as you inhale, you will take the suffering from others coming from their heart centers is black smoke and enters into your heart center, melting away your self-centeredness and ego, your ignorance. Important not to hang on to it, of course. Of course, prior to doing this, actually, I should have mentioned that we should bring to mind the difficulties and the suffering of others and do the best we can to generate the bodhicitta intention, the great compassionate intention to free living beings from suffering and to help them be happy. So as you breathe in the black smoke from others. As you breathe out the white light, representing all of your goodness and things you find pleasing, entering into the heart centers of all living beings in front of you. So inhaling, taking the black smoke, exhaling, giving the white light. So let's do this for a few minutes in silence. And rejoice in this practice as you do it. Be happy about it, enthusiastic. So once again, we can feel really pleased with ourselves. Just keeping your eyes closed. Try to keep the meditated mind right now, or meditative equipoise. And I just encourage you, when you do your own sessions of meditation, to do them for longer than we're able to do in these short classes. And just remind you that the reason why I chose this type of format, it's consistent, obviously, with face-to-face classes and so forth, but less time. But the reason I still wanted to do it like this is to give us the opportunity to practice the chanting and therefore help our minds to be absorbed with the Dharma, utilizing our speech and our body. And also some meditation practice, however short each part is. Of course, the breath meditation is predominantly to develop one-pointed concentration. Loving kindness meditation is obviously to increase, eventually perfect loving kindness, develop this immeasurable loving kindness. And the Tong meditation, of which we've been doing since we started this commentary on the 8 verses of thought transformation, is specifically to develop the great compassion, universal compassion. This practice also helps us to increase our wisdom by very simply decreasing our attachment to ourself, our ego, and our self-centeredness, and attachment to things we find pleasing, and even our own goodness. Everything like this, you know. So it's very profound practice, really, very simple methods, but wonderful methods to be able to develop more compassion and loving kindness and work our way towards realizing the supreme wisdom. So as we engage in these practices in our own time, then do them for longer, up to you how long. So now let's do the dedication prayer. Due to this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of the Buddha, so that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhicitta not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. And may the precious view of Shunyata, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. So once again, that prayer is helping us to dedicate all of our goodness, all of our practice to attaining the supreme enlightenment, unsurpassed supreme enlightenment, and then helping others to do likewise by increasing, eventually perfecting the bodhicitta, the great compassion and loving kindness based on wisdom, as well as realize the wisdom of emptiness, which is not separate from this loving kindness and compassion. Okay, so that's the 3 verses that we chant in the dedication prayer. Of course, many of you know that already. Okay, so we are continuing the commentary on the 2nd verse of the 8 verses of thought transformation. Whenever I'm with others, I will practice seeing myself as the lowest of all, and from the very depth of my heart, I will respectfully hold others as supreme. So if you missed last week, any of you, just have a look at last week's class. You can access it on the YouTube channel, or just scroll back to last Saturday and have a look at the video on Facebook if you like. Okay, so I don't have to repeat it today. And really talking about this verse, you know, we're talking about developing a mind of equanimity primarily. By balancing it out for so many lifetimes, we put ourselves above others. You know, our own well-being above others is more important. Now we are working to undo that, to develop more of a mind of equanimity. Because for us to develop the true loving kindness, which is the wish that all living beings have happiness and its causes, the causes of happiness, and true compassion, which is the wish that all living beings are free from suffering and free from the causes of suffering. To be able to do this genuinely, true compassion, true loving kindness, you have to develop a mind of equanimity, a mind that is not biased, a mind that is free from attachment and aversion, attachment to what we find pleasing, and free from aversion to things we find unpleasant. This can include living beings, people, animals, whatever, but also things, inanimate objects, or even nature, aspects of nature, and everything throughout the whole infinite space, anything, I should say, throughout the infinite space. Sometimes we may have attachment to something, aversion to other things, but this is always changing. That which you find pleasing may change, and not in the way that you want it to. So this attachment to it can turn to the opposite very quickly. Not just aversion in a bland way, but the active, fully blown anger and hatred and things like that. So we have to be very careful. Sometimes you can look at it and you think, oh, this attachment is not so bad. But then in its more extreme forms, it can turn very quickly. And also create a lot of unhappiness because everything's changing, things don't last, you get attached to something or someone, and then it changes or goes away, then you get upset. And the same with aversion. We have aversion to things we find unpleasant, but that could change. Those things could change. So maybe you have aversion to certain types of foods, and then all of a sudden your doctor says, I need to help you get a more balanced diet. You have to eat these types of foods. So then you can change your way and realize this is better for me. So I will do that, even if you still don't like the taste, but now you give up the aversion for it to be able to have a balanced diet. So it's the same with the mind. We need to develop this balanced mind that is not attached to this and having an aversion for that. Really important, okay? So to be able to develop this true compassion and this true love and kindness, we need to develop a mind of equanimity. And of course, to also, by giving up biases, we're developing a mind that is more joyful and more empathetic. So engaging all of what we call the four immeasurables, the immeasurables of universal love and kindness, universal compassion, universal empathetic joy, based on a mind of equanimity. And as we do this, as we give up the attachment, give up the aversion, we're also helping ourselves get closer and closer to uprooting the lack of wisdom. In other words, ignorance. In Pali, just to remind you, the word is avijja, the opposite of vijja. Vijja means to know. Avijja means not knowing. In Sanskrit, it's pronounced as avidya. Vidya means to know, avidya, not knowing. Okay, so I've kind of recapped a little bit towards what we spoke about last week, okay, but also expanded upon it without looking at my notes. So now I look at my notes, okay, the second page of my notes, there's 5 of them. So depends how quickly we go through the notes. And of course, I'm giving extra commentary, adding, you could say, or expanding upon these point notes that I've written down over time. And, there's no time limit here, but I imagine that I go through maybe a page each class-ish, sometimes less, sometimes more. All right, so true compassion and loving kindness in the context of training the mind is based on the simple recognition that others, like oneself, aspire naturally to be happy and to avoid suffering. I think this is quite simple to understand. We may not have it as the basis of our existence, of our life, because we are too self-centered, putting ourselves above others, always. In fact, a lot of the time, I think people just put their head in the sand and don't like to see the reality. That doesn't mean they're bad people or anything. It just means they don't want to face reality because they don't like what it is, or they're scared that they won't like what it is. Fearful, remember that while we have this, if I can use this word for convenience, unenlightened mind or non-enlightened mind, then we're always having hopes and fears, aren't we? Hoping for good conditions, hoping for happiness, fearing have bad conditions, fearing suffering, but to be able to give up on this wishing for or hoping for and fearing getting and so forth, we need to develop this mind of equanimity. And we need to realize that all living beings are the same as us in that way, okay? We're all interrelated, even if we are a little bit different. Each individual is different because of our past experiences and our habitual tendencies that we have right now. And then, of course, our intentions and will in this moment, okay? It's that when we impulsively react to certain stimuli or circumstances, certain people, certain things, try to undo that. Remember the teaching I gave in the 5 skandhas about the buffer zone, which is the teaching an idea I came up with probably about 15 or more years ago now. And in between our experience and reacting to the experience, we should create this buffer zone. to give ourselves the opportunity to not impulsively react in a certain way, habitual way, mostly, to certain things and certain conditions, okay, circumstances. Okay, so we have to realize that all living beings want happiness, but to realize the happiness, we have to engage in the causes of happiness, based on our actions and words based on good qualities, such as compassion and love and so forth. And of course, we want to avoid suffering. But to avoid suffering, we must avoid engaging in the causes of suffering. Okay? And this is the case with all living beings, not just ourselves. And so we all have this right to fulfill, or the right to fulfill this aspiration, or these aspirations, to have happiness, to avoid suffering. We actually all have the right to do that. But of course, we have to be more wise to be able to cause the happiness and avoid the suffering. Universal compassion and loving kindness has no prejudice or discrimination. How could it? I was alluding to that before. You know, how can we say, oh, you know what, to these guys over here, I'm going to be compassionate, but to those ones that I don't like, I'm going to wish that they are unhappy. You know, that's not equanimity, is it? That's not compassion at all. That's just you working with your bias, you know, and past experiences that have led to these habits that we have now that we unfortunately will take into the future unless we undo them. Okay, so that's the Tonglen meditation is so good for that. It helps us once again bring to mind the suffering of others, develop the compassion, and also loving kindness as well. And of course, then help us to diminish our attachment to self, our ego, and our self-centeredness. And also, you know, giving the happiness to others and giving away all of our attachments, things we finding that we want all the time, you know, things we find pleasing. Such a great technique. So true universal compassion, loving kindness has no prejudice or discrimination. We should extend this to all sentient beings with the mind based on the mind of equanimity or no bias. All beings can experience pain and can experience happiness, just like us. You know, we all have the potential to be happy. Excuse me. We have very strong winds, very bad winds here today. So we have the potential to be happy. Once again, I remind you, must engage in the causes of happiness. We also have the potential to free ourselves from suffering by not engaging in the causes of suffering. We have this potential. We can experience the pain. We do experience the pain. We do experience happiness. Okay. Essential is an essential feature of universal loving kindness on compassion is that it is universal. That's why I like to use that word a lot. It's not discriminatory. Okay. That's just reiterating what I said before. So therefore, in Buddhism, training the mind in cultivating compassion and loving kindness first involves cultivating a mind of equanimity, non-bias, and kind of like an even-mindedness is another way to put it, towards all beings, giving up the bias. Some beings really irritate us. Some beings are very harmful. That doesn't mean we condone their harmfulness or their behaviors or their states of mind, but realizing that they, in their true nature, they are Buddha. At the same time, they don't realize that now. They're causing suffering for themselves. So even if you think those beings that are behaving so badly and so harmfully now, they are creating really big sufferings for themselves in the future. So that should help us to give rise to having compassion for them, because they're going to experience that awful conditions in the future because of their awful behavior now. So another thing I'd like to, just little examples I'd like to give you. A friend Our friends right now have in the past been our enemies. Even if you don't believe that, or if you don't even think of other lifetimes, or even don't think about last week. But actually, you consider that it's a possibility, isn't it? So we have attachment to our friends, but at some stage in the past, it's possible, at least, that we had an aversion to them. Either to do with our own state of mind, or I should say both to do with our own state of mind as well as the way they behave in things. So our friends have been our enemies in the past, and our enemies now have been our friends in the past. It's constantly changing like this due to our own perception of it, as well as theirs, the way we perceive their behavior, but also the way they behave. And it's likewise with other living beings towards us. Strangers also, most living beings would come under the title of strangers when you think about what we call the three different types of beings or three types of people, for instance. Most people would come under the category of strangers. So think about that. It's the strangers have also been our friends and loved ones in the past. They've also been our enemies in the past. It's always changing, this is. This should help us to develop a mind of equanimity. Because those that we are attached to right now have been different in the past. We had aversion to them in the past. We didn't care about them in the past. Indifference. Like that. Okay. Cyclic existence is like that. So I think that'll do for the moment. I'll just pick up the rest of this next week, but reflect on this fluctuating nature of our relationships and on the potential for change, even from one moment to the next. Also reflect on animals and other realms, etc. Ourselves and others change. So I'll leave it as that, or at that, okay? And pick that up next week. It's gone so fast again. So I hope that you're doing well now. I hope you have a lovely week ahead. And I look forward to seeing you next week, and rejoice in your goodness always. Namo Buddhaya.